Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/ProRevenge. In today's episode, your dress code should be more specific. Boss was convinced we weren't working hard when he was at home. He decided to assign extra work. Don't follow the crowd or you'll never get to heaven. Okay then. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Your dress code should be more specific. One summer during college, I worked at a telemarketing agency. This was back when telemarketing was a semi-respectable job. I sold lots of different products, from long-distance phone plans to retirement annuities via a patriotic credit card company. Anyway, being a semi-respectable firm, our call center had a dress code. Nothing out of the ordinary really. Men had to wear button-up shirts with collars, a tie, dress pants, and dress shoes. No jeans, t-shirts, or sneakers. Women had more leeway. Pretty much the only restrictions were no open-toe shoes, and dresses had to be below the knee. Violating the dress code was punishable by being sent home for your shift. One day I had a laundry emergency. The clothes dryer had broken and all of my work shirts were still wet when I went to retrieve them. The only shirts I had left that were even close to dress code were shirts with a narrow collar. That is to say, almost no collar. As such, you don't wear a tie with this type of shirt. I decided to roll the dice. I suited up and threw on a blazer to help camouflage my dress code violation. Once I get to work, I go straight to my cube and work my shift with no problems. This is great. I had just doubled my work wardrobe. So I would wear one of my narrow shirts once a week or so. I didn't want to push my luck. During this same time, I had noticed some of the women blatantly violating the dress code. Way too short dresses, sweatpants, flip-flops, etc. No one ever called them out on it. I figured the dress code had been relaxed, and I just didn't get the memo. I continued to follow the dress code with the exception of my occasional narrow shirts. This went on for several weeks until one day my manager calls me into her office. I figure the jig is up. Sure enough, she has called me in to reprimand me for not wearing a tie. The HR manager is there as well. I tried to explain that you don't wear a tie with this type of shirt. The HR manager replied with, "That's a good point. That's 2 violations." I got a write-up but got to finish my shift since it was almost over anyway. Cue the malicious compliance. It was Friday, so I went home and stewed about the encounter. I hatched a plan. Saturday morning, I went to the local thrift store and bought some of the ugliest ties and button-up collared shirts I could find. One particularly scorching tie I found was knitted, bright orange with horizontal teal stripes. The shirts were mainly pastel colors, but I also found a few gems that included a pink, green, and yellow plaid, a red and neon green Hawaiian shirt, and a red, white, and blue vertical striped shirt. All button up with collars. I paid less than $10 for 10 shirts and 15 ties. To be fair, most of the items were not too bad on their own. However, when I went back to work, I made no effort to color coordinate. The result was a mix-mash of clashing colors and patterns that should have come with a warning may cause seizures label. I went to work the full week without acknowledging my outlandish attire. Why would I? I was following the dress code to the letter. By the Wednesday of the following week, management had had enough. Again, I was called into the manager's office. Again, the HR manager was also there. But there was a new guy. Turns out he was an executive from Patriotic Credit Card Company. Manager starts with, "We've had some complaints about your attire." I looked confused. "It's a collared shirt," I replied as I patted my tie as if to make sure it was still there. "Oh, it's not that. Your look is just... well, it's jarring. I don't follow." I drug this out for about 2 minutes before HR lady had had enough and just full-faced screamed at me. "Don't think I don't know what you're trying to pull, you little shit with your ugly clothes." Such language. And from an HR person. Executive guy was visibly taken aback. For my part, one just started crying. Huge crocodile tears. "You think my clothes are ugly?" At this point, everyone in the room is visibly uncomfortable as I continued to ugly cry in the office. Manager attempted to defuse the situation. "What we're trying to say is it's just unprofessional. I snapped up and screamed. She didn't say unprofessional. She said ugly. As I jabbed my finger at her. I was loud enough that I'm sure they heard me in on the call floor. I calmed down after a minute. What exactly is wrong with the way I'm dressed? I asked, still sobbing. Well, the colors. She started. I interrupted, what colors am I not allowed to wear? I caught an amused smirk from executive guy. Well, ere she stammered. Because there is no mention of prohibited colors in the dress code. I interrupted again. I don't think this is working out. You're fired. I stood up, collected myself. You will be hearing from my attorney. I said as I left the room. My attorney being my cousin, but they didn't need to know that. So yeah, I got fired. But it was a win in my book. I made them tell me my clothes were ugly. Also, I found out afterwards that not only did the company lose the patriotic credit card company annuity account, the HR manager was fired, asked to resign, and my manager was sent back to corporate. I would like to think I was the cause of that. Boss was convinced we weren't working hard when he was at home. He decided to assign extra work. This story happened a few years ago while working in a kitchen in the city I live in. My boss was your typical lonely drunk. Creepy compliments to the staff and inappropriate conversations with them as well. Abusive to anyone working under him, and a lack of respect to other management when he felt he was above them. He ended most nights by disappearing during the dinner rush and slamming a 24 of beer by himself at home. My friend and I worked Tuesday to Saturday close shifts every day for a year. We became best friends through the suffering of this man's abuse. We could never do a good job in his eyes. Nothing was ever clean enough or good enough for him. He had this opinion that we never tried hard enough, and we must be slacking off when he's not there. He decided the solution to his problem was to assign us extra cleaning. Since most everything was already perfectly clean, he decided to ask us for two things. Scrub the grout between the tiles, and clean the foam ceiling inserts with soap and water. These had to be completed, or we were going to get written up. The next day rolls around and things are not as clean as usual for the clothes, since I was on my hands and knees scrubbing the tiles all night. Boss man took this as a personal attack and unloaded on us. I proceeded to explain that scrubbing it isn't getting it any cleaner, and there's nothing I can do. I also showed him the one tile that came out of the floor. He grabs a butter knife and cuts all the grout out around one tile. It was black and crumbled and filled with oil. I tried explaining and showing him that he was going to ruin the floor, but it fell on deaf ears. After proving to himself it was possible by completely removing a tile, he told us it had to be done by the end of the week. Here's the malicious compliance. Despite me telling him that it wasn't working, he insisted he was right. I told him many times it would ruin the floor, and he didn't listen. So that night I spent a few hours doing exactly as he showed me until there was a large portion of the floor with loose tiles. He was disappointed that only got about 1 square meter of flooring done and wanted the rest done by the end of the day. Commercials' kitchens are huge and these tiles were small. So I decided to focus on the main line where everyone works. I got about 75% of the main working area degrouted in 2 days and left the loosest tiles in their place. The floors in professional kitchens are designed to drain water in a specific direction and be smooth enough to clear all debris when swept. Since the tiles were all loose in the floor, sweeping and mopping only pushed dirt and brown water into the holes where the grout used to be. Upper management came into work for the weekend, and they all had to stand on this wet stinky mess of tiles that was hard to balance on. It wasn't long before they asked what was wrong with the floor. Instead of saying that he made a mistake and asked us to do exactly that, he blamed us on the spot, saying he would never clean a floor like that, and we must be stupid liars. Just truly a classic POS. I never got around to soaking the foam ceiling boards, sadly. Since I guess he realized how stupid it was. I never got any petty revenge either. I left feeling like bad people truly do just get away with being bad people. Skip to 6 months after I had left the company. I get a message from a friend who worked there as well. She explained that she had written a letter to HR detailing this man's abuse and weird sexual comments to her and others in the workplace, and in private, she mentioned she had included some things I had told her. He was fired on the spot. No discussion or chance to prove himself. I'm not sure if they already knew he was like this, Or maybe they just knew that no one would make up a 2-page 5-paragraph letter about him for no reason. He left the country immediately after losing his job and filled his social media with photos of him in suits with captions like "Heart of Gold." I still resent this man but enjoy thinking about this story from time to time. I have many more stories about this man but nothing that fits on this sub. Don't follow the crowd or you'll never get to heaven. Okay then. This is a story of child me thoroughly upsetting my mother, disrupting a church service, and undermining a sermon through malicious compliance. I do still argue that my view also represented a serious theological argument, but this story is frequently brought up to show how contrarian and poorly behaved I was a child, or how much I think I'm so funny. I was about 10 years old at this time, but already showing some displeasure with weekly church attendance when there was video games or sleeping in I could be doing on Sunday mornings. In the church where I grew up, children would start the service with the adults, and after a few songs they would head out to a back room and do more child-appropriate lessons while the adults had their longer, more boring sermons. My mother took an active role in the kids' activities, and to her credit spent a lot of time trying to make it fun, doing plays or musical numbers that the children would all practice, and then come into the adult service to present what we had learned. For a couple of weeks leading up to this incident we had been learning about the parable of the 2 gates in Matthew 7:13-15. 13 Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. 14 But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. You don't have to be a Christian scholar to guess the message here. Getting to heaven can be tough. You will walk the path less traveled. You must not be tempted to conform to majority. The time came for us to present how much we had learned to the rest of the church. Instead of going to our back room, all of the kids head up on stage. My mother and her helpers have arranged 2 doorways, one very big and one very narrow. The narrow doorway has heaven written above it, and the broad doorway hell. A few well-spoken kids get their turn on the microphone to talk about the parable, and how they promise not to be led astray by the crowd and stay focused on their faith, even if it's the harder path, etc. We are then all lined up and told to choose our doorway. Cue malicious compliance. Every child walks one by one through the narrow doorway marked heaven and stands in a group behind as the congregation smiles and cheers their dedication to Christ. It was a literal and everyone clapped moment right up until I proudly strut through the broad doorway marked hell. There's a few nervous laughs and a lot of frowns until the minister asks me, didn't I walk through the wrong door? No sir. The Bible teaches we should not follow the crowd, so this must be the difficult door that leads to heaven after all. I got a few more laughs and the minister started to chastise me for not understanding the lesson. I was ordered to go through the correct door by my mother and did so with the most smug 12-year-old grin you can imagine. The fallout later was as expected. I had a lot of old ladies scolding me at the morning tea after church, my mother confiscated my video games for a couple of weeks, and I was made to write a letter of apology to the minister. Regardless, I still feel like I made my point, and at the benefit of disrupting a church service I didn't want to attend. A few months, and a few more outspoken jabs at the church lessons, later, and I was given permission to stay home from church if I didn't want to go anymore. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.